Major funding for this program is provided by the University of Pittsburgh. Pitt is a leader in education, pioneer in research, and partner in regional development. At the University of Pittsburgh, we are building our future together. Additional funding by the African American Chamber of Commerce.
It was a national mood that swept the country, I believe. I think that we had just come through World War II, we had just come through the Korean War, and I think people were prepared to try and see about having more equity and more fairness.
That's a source of real distress to me. The fact that we allow ourselves to be manipulated, and we are so naive about it, to be manipulated by the political structure.
I think the American dream is just that. It's a dream that never came true. Being militant in the sense that you're actively concerned about a specific set of problems is quite different, and are willing to take specific action on those problems is a kind of militancy I think we need.
I think the thing that sustained many of us during those years was we had strong faith that things were going to be better.
It was a significant time because you had a couple forces in play. One was, of course, there was the breakthrough generation, the first series of so many of us were able to get into environments we had never been before.
Understand that I wasn't playing by the rules. And the rules were that the white person controlled my destiny.
Those of us of color, we had a wonderful opportunity to show what we could do. And that's what it was really all about. We were there primarily to lay the foundation so other blacks could follow.
Freedom Corner is much more than a monument. It was and is the launching site for hundreds of marches and thousands of dreams. For Pittsburgh, it is a reminder of the brave men and women who risked everything by speaking truth to power and in the process changed the city forever. I'm Chris Moore, and we call them Torchbearers.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child.
The 1960s was nationally as well as locally a very dramatic, exciting time, a time that really black Americans took center stage in the development of this society and fundamentally changed the whole nature of race relations, of how whites thought of blacks, of how blacks thought of whites, how blacks thought of themselves.
A man who forced white Pittsburghers to deal with the presence of Negroes in everyday life was Regis Babanas Sr., the first African American to report for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette in the 1950s and for Channel 11 News in the 60s. Regis literally appeared in their living rooms every night.
Well, one thing, you can't lower your eyes and bake off and say, I'm not a role model, I'm not this, I'm not that. Because if you happen to just be aware of your circumstances, you know you're in a fishbowl. People are looking and watching and evaluating. That's just human nature. So therefore, to be a torchbearer has been the challenge of my life.
And the challenges weren't just philosophical. There was equal employment, equal access, equal rights, and equal pay. Seemingly new concepts to most of the people who controlled Pittsburgh, including the public utilities. At the time of these first protests, Judge Livingston Johnson of the Court of Common Pleas was an assistant county solicitor. He also was a civil rights organizer who helped plan the Duquesne Light protest.
When I came back from law school in 1957, I was approached by Bird Brown. And at that time, Bird was the president of the NAACP. Our first target was the Duquesne Light Company. And we selected the Duquesne Light Company because they were essentially a monopoly, a public monopoly. And we determined that there was absolutely no justification and no defense that they could have for continuing to remain segregated and bigoted. Of the 3,700 employees they had, if memory serves me correctly, 50 African Americans. Of the 50 African American employees, 25 were laborers in their coal mine at El Rama, Pennsylvania, up near Elizabeth, PA. And of the other 25, they were grass cutters pushing lawnmowers.
For a number of years prior to the month of August 1963, the month in which the Duquesne Light demonstrations took place, I and many other members of the black community had been expending a tremendous amount of effort bringing to the general public the inequities which existed in industry and various types of industries in the Pittsburgh area.
As I recall at that time, there was a meeting with the United Negro Protest Committee, which was headed by Jim McCoy. It was an outgrowth of the NAACP. Jim was a labor leader, steelworkers. What had happened, he was chairman of the Labor and Industry Committee of the NAACP. But for organizations, some things took too long for Jim.
The protesters weren't content to wait for a pang of conscience. They took to the streets of downtown, where they were met by many supporters and a few well-placed missiles.
All of a sudden, this pouch of liquid hit me on my head, and it broke. And I said, dag. It wasn't dag, you know, but I said it. It began with a D. And I said, somebody hit me with some water. And there was a woman, Texas, Beverlina Jackson, that was standing next to me, and she did like this to me. She said, that ain't no water, that's... I said, I'll be darned.
The Duquesne Lights people were throwing urine and spitting down on us, throwing water out on us from up above. That's a 6-story building down there, trying to break our spirit.
Fortunately for the men and women on 6th Street, they had help from unexpected places.
Our mole at the time, and I think it can be told now, was Jesse Bolden. We had enough training and education, ability and acumen to do as much electrical work as any electrician could. They didn't hire him as an electrician, they hired him as a janitor. He would call me at my home early in the morning, 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and he would fill me in on statistical information that we needed. We would compare notes. I'd tell him what I'd been told by Perrin and the Duquesne Light people the night before, and I'd run it past Jesse, and he'd confirm or deny as best he could.
After weeks of negotiations, the protesters finally reached an agreement with Duquesne Light that later resulted in many advancements for African Americans within the company. Victor A. Roque was named president in 2001, and Regis Babanis became public affairs manager.
When I first went to Duquesne Light, everyone that had been there, the old line engineers who had experienced that, who had looked out the windows and threw bags of water down on the protester, had a real guilt thing, because every conversation I had with senior management involving what we call the Mustang would mention, yeah, well, that was a bad time. We certainly learned from that. One day they were there in light clothing, and the next day we were there with heavy covering and hard hats to protect themselves from the missiles, if you will, being tossed at them. But contrast this. Over time, Duquesne Light became one of the best employers, and during my time there, the business that it did with minority vendors went from zilch practically to over $2 million commitment.
The respect we won when our course was right. On April 4th, 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. Cities across America were set on fire, and Pittsburgh was no different.
In '68, when King was assassinated, a number of us felt the tension in the community, in the Negro community. And on Friday night, we had a meeting at the Ebenezer Church.
The burning of the Hill district, because I don't think they thought of what they were really doing. It was just extemporaneously, someone said, well, let's burn this store.
Many of the young black Muslims were anti-liquor, anti-booze, and they were going to that's going to be the first thing, attack the bars, attack the liquor store. So I left Ebenezer, walked downhill around the corner to a liquor store. And there are three guys, one black and two white, standing up with brooms in their hands, looking scared to death. So I talked to these guys and I said, you want to close up? They said, yep. I said, I just talked to the governor, close up. So they closed up right then, took their brooms and got the devil out, and soon thereafter the place was in shambles.
Or Wendell Freeland, who himself looks white, and in these interviews I've been doing with Kaylee Roy Irvis, he talks about during the riots, when Irvis was down at Center and Kirkpatrick, right in the epicenter of the riots, the main black leader who came down to work with him was Wendell Freeland. And Irvis told him, Wendell, you got to get out of here, Wendell. This isn't going to work, Wendell. They're not going to know, Wendell. And Wendell was insisting that he be out there with Irvis side by side during the riots. Irvis said he finally persuaded him. He said, Wendell, look, I tell you, you go down to the number 2 police station and you wait there, so that when the guys get arrested, you get them out. And Wendell then, he agreed finally, okay, if I can have that role, oh yeah, I'll accept that. But Wendell was ready to be out there right on the front lines. And he was always someone, he never hid his race, he never hid his identity.
We had a meeting up at another meeting at Ebenezer, and went down to number 2 police station. And you could see the anger rising. I mean, literally, you could see smoke, there's almost smoke coming out of the people. Harvey was a sergeant then, I believe. And he came out, and these white cops were all gathered. Hell, Harvey got out there with these cops. They were surrounded by, we were a mob, as I'm sure as they saw us. And called them to attention and had them march in formation, just as if they were at a morning countdown. And that calmed it down.
Wendell was our white boy. Yeah, he could pass and we, so he often would penetrate before people knew that he was there penetrating.
And so as an ambassador from the blacks to the whites and vice versa, I think I've served a noble role.
I've been told by others that at some point early on in every conversation with you, sort of like Catholics do, one way or the other, they'll let you know that they're Catholic, let's say. Wendell, in some way or another, would let people know that he was black. During one of the marches, one of the demonstrations, when the police had formed a phalanx, a line that was blocking the demonstrators from proceeding on further downtown, Alma Fox got on her knees, crawled between the legs of the policemen and went over to the other side, breaking through the barrier which they had set up.
Well, we're trying to push through. We're trying to get through. They're saying, no, we're not. We look in the back and the Hill District is on fire. It must, it was an amazing sight. But we're pushing and we're saying we're going. They're saying, no, we're not. And the paddy wagons were on the other side of the barrier. And I looked down and there was this great big space between the legs. And I scooted under there and I got over and I said to everybody, come on, I could make it. So then everybody started to push and they threw me in the paddy wagon. 4 police officers, one for each leg and one for each limb, threw me in the paddy wagon.
Alma Speed Fox and the whole movement, the NAACP and her activity, she was so important because she brought in a dimension of the civil rights movement that we tend to overlook today. That is the important role of women. Women were critical to the success of that movement for a number of reasons, but one of the key reasons was that women had the ability to stay nonviolent. That if that movement had been exclusively male, if it had involved more than just a few men, there's a good chance it would not have remained nonviolent.
We were doing what we were supposed to do. We were not supposed to be in the forefront. The protest movement, equality was for black men. That's what we were fighting for. We wanted men to be uplifted.
Sweet Lord, sweet chariot.
We were trying to promote black men. We were trying to get black men in the forefront so they could have the jobs. The women were in the background making things work.
I think of necessity, the Negro community seems to have been marked by a matriarchal approach because Negro men haven't always been able to secure jobs or to take the leadership roles that men in other segments of the community have taken. So that Negro women have assumed, in a sense, a dual role. They've gone out and worked and kept the family together. But I think now, with the emergence of more opportunities for employment and education, there will be more emphasis on Negro men assuming whatever role they should assume.
And women were very important in this regard. They could be very aggressive, very militant, but they still had the ability to control themselves and not get so, there's not that machismo involvement that when someone would attack them, they wouldn't say, uh-oh, we got to go to the mat on this one. I'm not taking, that's an affront to my masculinity. Well, it's not an affront to their femininity. So they could behave very aggressively and actively, but at the same time keep the movement under control. And this is what occurs in the 1950s and 60s, that during that era, it was not just a time that blacks became more physically involved in civil rights, marching, protesting. They did that. But they also were moving in now with the credentials which enabled them to assume positions of leadership and direct involvement in many institutions in American life. Helen Faison represents one of those women who did this. That is, she came to the table, she came to the movement as a committed individual, but also someone with the credentials that she could then move into that school system, into the operation, into the bureaucracy, make a difference, make an impact as an officer and a leader of the system.
First of all, when I graduated from the University of Pittsburgh, raring to go as a teacher, I could not get a job teaching in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh had hired a few black teachers, primarily in music and physical education, a few, in special education, and that was about it. You always wanted to be sure that you were chosen to do the job because someone thought you could do it, and not simply because there was a pressure on to hire some black people. And there had to be the pressure. I'm not belittling that, and probably isn't enough of it there now. Not only did we have our first teacher strike at the end of my first month almost of being a principal, that also was the year when Martin Luther King was slain. And I was Fifth Avenue's principal when that happened. So it was a rough time. And there were some sharp kids at that school then. And those youngsters really putting the pressure on the teachers, the principal, and the rest of them to do something about having some black influence on the curriculum at the school.
I was the chairman of the NAACP Education Committee. Bert Brown asked me to chair that committee. And we started meeting together, started getting the committee to understand what we were going to do. We went to the board and asked for action. No action.
Because some of the teachers were afraid, they didn't know how they should behave, that kind of thing. And you had to be a steady head for them and couldn't show, no matter how you're trembling inside, you couldn't show it. You had to be there every day. You didn't dare miss a day. I remember, for example, the morning after King was assassinated, I felt that it was our responsibility to be at school to receive the kids when they came, because they didn't understand what had happened, they didn't know how they were to behave. So I got up and got to school as early as I could. And it probably wasn't that morning, but a few mornings after that, when I got to school, the National Guard was marching down Dinwiddie Street.
See, in those days they had, when the 60s, when King was assassinated, they had the National Guards in the neighborhoods. There were jeeps and there were soldiers around who were keeping law and order. And, one of the things that we did during those days was at the center to keep the young youngsters from confronting the police. We stayed inside the center and fed the kids.
Well, Jimmy Joe Robinson was the counterpart of a Reverend Patrick, that is a minister, a man of the faith, who put his own life on the line down south, Alabama, in the marches there, which were very dangerous. And he did the same thing up in Pittsburgh, leading demonstrations for the employment, changing the employment practices of downtown Pittsburgh firms and the like, leading the demonstrations from Freedom Square at considerable risk to himself.
We saw that the unions were not incorporating young black males into the unions. And so some of us began to meet and to talk about ways that we could try to make the union open up their doors to incorporate young blacks or blacks into the unions. And they balked at it, and they weren't going to do it. So we organized a group called the Black Construction Coalition, and we began to demonstrate daily, and picketing, and trying and sitting down at the union with the unions to try to get them to open up their doors to put them into training, putting blacks into training in there, and. There were some tough days.
Bill Moore was a commander. He was our savior. As a commander, he did have great respect from the police department, which later eroded. And he helped us a lot. He got us through a lot of things. And many people who would have been arrested were not because of Muggsy Moore.
Muggsy was a real help to me. Muggsy informed me that my line was tapped. My phone was tapped. Muggsy informed me that there was a group of white suburban women who came down to Manchester. We were being funded by the Pittsburgh Presbytery, that I had a straight line to China, that I was a communist, and they tried to have a heresy trial on me. I'm getting deep into the stuff that I didn't want to talk about.
So I told Slusser, who was police chief, that you're going to have to arrest me tomorrow morning because we're going to stop these trucks from coming in. They're bringing in the cement, you know. The truck came in, and I stood in front of the truck. Superintendent Slaughter said to me, Act so-and-so and so 544 XYZ says I may arrest you. If you don't move, I'm going to arrest you. I wouldn't move. The truck kept creeping. I said, Lord, now suppose this fellow says his foot slipped off the brake. I'm thinking this in my mind, but I wouldn't move. That I was frightened, because I didn't know. Getting closer and closer. Finally, about that far from me, he stopped the truck. I wouldn't move. And Slosser put me in the paddy wagon, took me down to number 5 station, Center Avenue station. By the time the police wagon got around and cut me to the building was full of blacks. Reverend Patrick been arrested, Reverend Patrick been arrested, Reverend Patrick been arrested. I'm hoping they would book me, put me in jail, you know, have my picture taken behind the bars. They wouldn't do that, they'd do it. Had me stand out there, and Slosser went and called someone. I suspect he must have called the mayor. I'm theorizing here, because he came out and gave me a lecture and let me go. I was not booked. So the crowd dispersed.
And so one of the key ways in which this redefinition took place was that blacks became active instigators, active agents in shaping their own future. In the past, the future had been shaped pretty much either by whites, white liberals, let's say, or white racists, or it had been shaped in the boardrooms and in the legal, let's say, back rooms of maneuvers that had taken place. But the people weren't themselves directly involved.
So we had to demonstrate, and it was an ongoing thing. And so the Black Construction Coalition was the way to do it. It got rough. In fact, it got so tough that they had to close down all the jobs. It was called Black Monday. I don't know if you remember it, because it got kind of violent. And there were some threats made that if you continue to do this, some of you are going to really, be taken down.
We were protesting the building of the U.S. Steel building, you know, that $60-some building. You wouldn't believe it. That big building, and not one black working anywhere. You know, and you wouldn't believe it today.
Blessed assurance, Jesus is mine.
Ministers are some of the most radical people in the world are ministers. People like Bonhoeffer. I began to wonder if King had lived. And I saw it at Selma, where young blacks were beginning to question whether or not demonstrations were going to bring about justice. There was a lot of people who felt that is justice going to be achieved by nonviolent means.
Urine throwing down on us. Urine now, yeah. How gross can you get? You know, how gross can you get? Just bucketing urine at us. That was. Well, I tell you, what the man will do when he feels threatened. I don't know why they should have felt threatened, because we were not. We were orderly.
Protests about jobs were carried out at a variety of places, from U.S. Steel downtown to the Mine Safety Appliance Company in Homewood. Wherever protests were held, people showed up enthusiastically, in great numbers, because it was all about getting blacks on the job, even during the construction of WQED TV.
And of course, it wasn't hard to get people downtown then or any place else to march if they thought a job was in the wake, because so many of us did not have jobs and we were looking for jobs.
This is where I am. And you can't get it by praying. You pray and then go on and do what you got to do.
Naturally, the young people are not going to follow in the footstep of the older people. because, you know, the church has really been an arm of the law, along with other social services that come into the black neighborhood, to keep us in nigger hell.
These are the kinds of things that I had to think, that I had to come out of the whole idea of just being a compassionate, perfume-smelling, handkerchief-wearing black guy, you know, in the Christian church. And if you want to call it being radical, I didn't think it was all that radical. But everybody else thought it was radical. They thought I was crazy.
Newsweek pointed out in that article they had on the Negro that Congress says it will not reward the rioters. The Newsweek pointed out that it had not rewarded the responsible leaders. The Roy Wilkinses, the Whitney Youngs, had not been rewarded either, you know. So if you're not going to reward them, you're not going to reward the rioters, then what are you going to do? Nothing, which is what Congress likes to do.
Including participation in the projects by families.
African-American clergy weren't the only ones involved in the struggle. Monsignor Owen Rice was famous for his activism. In fact, he was nicknamed the labor priest for his outspoken work in the labor movement.
A priest should do what he can in his own parish, or if he feels equipped and if have enough self-confidence, he should, on a broad base, he should do what he can. When he sees evils, he should speak against them and work against them, and he should try to help people in positive ways. I would say that the modern priest today, there is a compulsion, there should be a religious compulsion that he would do these things, because the power that he has to change and help is tremendous.
You just can't do it in the pulpit. And that's, I think, one of the weaknesses of the pulpit today, that not enough of us in the pulpit today feel that he must go beyond the pulpit. The pulpit gave me my, what I needed within to keep going. Because I said, I'm not a social worker. But by golly, if Jesus could do this, then I can do this.
And I was accused of saying that we were training, the center was training these kids to build firebombs and was doing all that. But when the women from the suburbs came in with their aprons on and stood in front of the Bidwell Center and chanted and ran it and went on like that, our youngsters looked at them and laughed. But those were Presbyterians who felt that I was a disgrace to the Pittsburgh Presbytery and to the Presbyterian Church.
Oh, Jimmy Joe. Jimmy Joe is on the north side, and I'm in Homewood. Together we shook up this presbytery. We shook up this presbytery.
The presbytery wasn't the only thing that Reverend Patrick shook up.
Oh, he was truly an inspiration. Many people have told me, I'm doing a history right now of K. Leroy Irvis. And Irvis himself is known as a firebrand. He said, you know, that Reverend Patrick, he was my hero, my idol. That man went on out there and got in those pools, didn't know how to swim, put his life at risk, and really told people that it's time to start doing something, stop just talking about what needs to be done and get on out and take a chance.
When Reverend Patrick came to Pittsburgh, we weren't allowed to, when I say we, I mean people of darker race, we weren't permitted to go into Highland Park Pool. The pools weren't integrated at that time. We had a pool in the Hill District called Kennard Pool, but to go into Highland Park Pool, we didn't have enough courage. But Reverend Leroy Patrick decided, and he had one of his sons with him when he jumped in the pool. And I don't think he knew how to swim, but he was in the shallow part. But he integrated the Highland Park Pool.
Well, that was one of the ironies of it. Pat and I couldn't swim. He was chairman of the swimming pool committee, and I was a lawyer for the swimming pool committee, and we couldn't swim between us. It was one of those times when the Urban League and the NAACP got together. And we devised a theory to sue the city. The city has two roles. One, it's a governmental role, the other is a proprietary role. Certain services, policemen, that's government. Proprietary may be indeed a swimming pool. So anyway, we sued, claiming that the city was wrong. It was violating the Civil Rights Act of Pennsylvania, because this is a place of public accommodation, and Negroes were being denied entry.
One was a fellow who could give you the reasons, factual, the legal, the solid legal foundation that you would need to move along. I've never seen one excited, whereas I'm willing to bluster, and one was calm and collected, and we did it like this. You know, we were to meet at 1 o'clock at Highland Park Pool on that Saturday. There were about 500 policemen around that pool. It seemed that way to me then, you know, so many. And young people, you know, 1 o'clock, not one of them showed up. 1:15, nobody showed up. 1:25, the lieutenant comes to me, you know, the guy in the white shirt, all these other guys in the blue shirt. We're young people. I'm beginning to say, now, Lord, let the ground swallow me up. I said, oh, there must have been a misunderstanding. We were supposed to meet at Rhododendron Grove for our picnic afterwards. It must be over there. I'll go there and get them. I went there. There must have been a dozen of my young people in that grove. I said, what do you mean we're here? We're supposed to go swimming. The girl said, I don't like to swim. The boy said, I didn't bring my trunks. Bob Bell said, I have my trunks and I have an extra pair. I grabbed him by the arm and grabbed the next fellow nearest to me. I grabbed by the arm and, come on, we're going to the pool. I'm not a swimmer. So the boys went and then jumped in the water. And every white kid in that pool came out of the water. Every one of them. Not one was left. My boys were startled. I was not surprised, but they were sort of surprised. And I said, oh, hey, boy, we're going to have a great time here. You know, I'm pretending now. We got a great time. And they did. They were on the high rise, on the high pool, you know, and take a dive, and then they fight with each other in the deep water. I'm back here standing looking at, you know, yes, yeah, hi, go fellas, keep it up. Well, in about 30 minutes, Reverend Patrick, can we go now? Can we go now? No, we can't go yet, we can't go yet. I felt we had not been there long enough to make a statement, you understand. So, along about 30 minutes later, maybe we'd been about an hour, 10 minutes, I said, hey, fellas, we better get out of here now because they'll eat all the picnic food before we get there. We don't get back in there. That's for the crowd, you know. That's why we're going, not because you're running us out, but that's why we're going. See, when they got out of the water, they scooped up hands full of water. Dirty water, nigger water, other epithets, you know, like that. But we pretended that I didn't hear it, you know. You don't hear things like that. You just let it recite off you. So we went back and got our clothes and got on our clothes. Officer followed us in the locker room, and I didn't have to hold the arms getting back to the Rhododendron Grove. The fellows were there before I got there. So that was that experience. That is my introduction to Pittsburgh.
As Reverend Patrick and others proved, what should be child's play could sometimes become deadly serious. For Herb Douglas, football was more than just a game.
See, during that period, there were only 39 African Americans in Division I football. I look at the roster now at Pitt. There's 50 on our team alone. And throughout the United States, there was only 39, as I just mentioned. So we've made a lot of progress. In football, we've made a lot of progress, period.
He's a great man. We're just honored to know him. And when he ran track for University of Pittsburgh. He was the first, and they respected him. Then he went on to be a world runner, highly respected.
But back then, the only people who really respected Herb Douglas and Jimmy Joe Robinson, the first black to play for Pitt, were their teammates.
In West Virginia, they were very nasty. I remember once a guy wasn't even in the play, and he was coming over just to rack me up. I was out of the play, and I saw him coming, and he just said, "Ooh," and called me the N-word. He just kept saying the N-word, and as he got closer to me, my skinny elbow I put up like that, and we didn't have face guards then, and he ran into my skinny elbow, and I guess he broke his jaw or something.
I was accepted. I was a good athlete, and on the field, it was equal. It was off the field that it was unequal. That's the way it is. That's the way it was. The teammates were always good. You know, I had families there that were good. Neighbors were good, and but on the football field, things were equal. If you could play and do well, then you were accepted. You know, that's just the way it was.
Our teammates during that time, we were very close, and even today, some of us are close. Had we not been in the capacity of winners, I wonder if they'd have been that close. See, there's a difference. When you're successful, people are around you, and when you're down, they're not as much.
Herb was a walk-on at Pitt for football. His real strengths were in track and field. At Alderdice High School, he set 3 state records in track. He went on to win a bronze medal in the broad jump at the 1948 Olympics.
Wembley Stadium, concerned with the serious matter of Olympic contests, makes history. In the long jump, American supremacy is again clearly shown, with a teammate Douglas also placed.
You take going through school, even high school, I was state champion. I won 3 state championships, 100, the 220, and the broad jump, as we called it. Now the media, they came through. They gave me the headlines. But my yearbook at Alderdice High School, the school I attended, they never mentioned it, that I was a state champ, because I was African American, I guess, but it never bothered me, because I knew what I could do within myself.
Though Herb only played 1 year of football at Pitt, he made his mark in a game against Notre Dame.
So finally, Shaughnessy looked down the bench and said, "Douglas, go in there." And so they never would put Jimmy Joe and I in at the same time. No, it would either be Jimmy or myself. So when I got in, I heard them say, "That's him." Well, I went out in a banana type of run and caught a touchdown right away and went for a touchdown. And then after that, they called me a lot of names. I can't repeat. I'm the only Olympic medalist to ever score against Notre Dame. That's period.
You know one thing? He lucked up on it, carried the ball like he had a loaf of bread. See, he didn't play ball in high school. And they didn't use him. He never played that much. They locked up and threw him in there, and the ball bounced in his arms, and he flew out there and got the ball, and man, nobody could catch it. He talked about that night, that week, that month. He talked about that at his 80th birthday. He ran his mouth. Man, he never shut up about it.
You know, it's really interesting because Jimmy and I were in school and how we went different ways. You know, I went into the corporate community and he went into the ministerial.
Herb's success in his chosen field is unparalleled. He firmly believes that giving back is a privilege handed down to him by others.
Definitely. Track and field opened the doors. If I go someplace now, then they mention that I was an Olympian, the door opens. But when you get inside, you have to be prepared. That's what Pitt did for me. Pitt prepared me. And the NAACP got me my job. It's as elementary as that.
African Americans playing college football is something that we now take for granted, just like the ability to buy or sell a house anywhere in the country. African American realtors owe that hard-won ability to a single man, Robert R. Lavelle.
So I have the same license you do, and yet I'm denied the opportunity to have the same income that you have. And I'm not going to permit it. Oh, you're threatening us, huh? I said, no. I said, I've been trying to be polite and nice and kind, and I was all for 7 or 8 years as this realtor who was accepting the crumbs, you know, that came down when white people denied, they would allow me to maybe buy a house or sell a house in an area that they're leaving, and so then that was fine. But they want a house maybe in Squirrel Hill at the time, or Mount Lebanon or somewhere. Well, that was not because, you know, people don't want you there.
Robert Lavelle and the multi-list. That was a very tough battle he faced because housing itself, even today, housing is probably the most segregated part of American life, maybe as they say after the churches. So it was no small matter when Robert Lavelle took on the multi-list and housing segregation.
Multi-list is a group of realtors who come together voluntarily in order to control the markets where they are, East Suburban Multi-list and Mount Lebanon Multi-list, whatever. And in doing so, they have the homeowner understand that you have to list with multi-list because you have maybe 20 offices selling your home for one commission. But if you're not in multi-list, then you don't have any 20 offices to offer the homeowner to sell their home. You only have yourself. So I didn't have that type of input, to be able to get listings. And besides, that was a way of keeping me out of those areas, black people from living in those areas.
He has achieved all that he has through hard work and perseverance, and now he'll say it all came through God. He has made it possible for black people to succeed in the real estate business.
So they entered the suit, and right away the realtors were all up in arms here. Why didn't I go to the Human Relations Commission? What am I doing in federal court? Human Relations Commission would have slapped them on the wrist, fined them $100, and that would have been the end of it, And I said, no, this is something to be done for the whole country.
You did not have the opportunity to sell houses that were in Squirrel Hill or Fox Chapel or Sewickley or Mount Lebanon. Then he sued the multi-list and the Board of Realtors and won the suit, which was very, very costly, so that the houses that are listed in these expensive neighborhoods are now accessible to people who sell real estate.
The people throughout the country, the realtors throughout the country, start sending money here to this institute, the white realtors, to fight this suit against this upstart guy, who thinks he can change rules and laws, because the need for equality. Why didn't he just go through the proper channels to do that? Why is he in the money areas of life, the commerce areas? And well, when you're trying to do something on a national level, you have to be in federal court. So there we were.
Bob Lavelle attempted to join the multi-list years ago. And the Greater Pittsburgh Board of Realtors, in their racist history and wanting to continue their racism, they rejected him and refused to let him become a member. And he brought a lawsuit against the Greater Pittsburgh Board of Realtors and prevailed.
We had 5 of those pretrial conferences, 5. At the 5th one ended with the necessity for, the 5th one ended with them capitulating without going to trial, actual trial in the federal court, which would have been a Supreme Court thing. And when they capitulated for all the realtors in the country agreed to the same thing.
There wouldn't be a black realtor in Pittsburgh who would have a business worth its salt if it hadn't been for Bob Lavelle.
every black person throughout the United States could buy a house anywhere, whether it's through a black realtor or a white realtor.
What does it take to make history? Is there a definable characteristic, or is it a simple matter of being at the right place at the right time? Is it a question of limits, that having taken so much that fervor acquiescence is no longer an option? What motivated these men and women to lead exemplary lives? Is it nearly as important as what they've achieved by doing so? Theirs are the broad shoulders on which we continue to stand as we make our way through a world that they helped make possible.
Battles have just begun. I really fear for the future generations. We have lost so many battles in the past dozen years or so. We have given to the opponents of justice vocabulary which they use against us. They use affirmative action against us. They use the language of king against us. We're measured by ability, by character, and not by the color of skin. Well, of course, we've been measured by the color of our skins for generations.
Well, I stumbled into a lot of things. And the way that it works out now, and I look at the journey of faith, I hope I've been able to make a mark to be able to, as I look back, that would give other youngsters some inspiration to be able to go on, and that they would give their lives to being able to help other people.
Looking back now, I wonder how I did all these things. Well, I think it comes from within, a spontaneous feeling that I said that I must make religion come alive on the streets. If I don't make it alive on the streets, there's no point in trying to make it alive at my sanctuary. But on Sunday morning now, I was seldom absent from the pulpit, because if I don't keep those people's souls filled with the gospel, but I've always said the gospel has an upward side. You see, I feed your souls on Sunday, but I got to help you out on Monday. What are you doing? And that's been my motto.
Fortunately, I have a talent of organizing, and a lot of that stuff I didn't do. Maybe other people were doing it, and we were doing it as a group. And because I have a big mouth, I'm saying something that other people may have wanted to say, but were too shy to say. And so I get the credit. But if I had been a torchbearer, believe me, there have been a whole lot of people in back of me, sort of pushing me along. And if the flame went out, they were there to light the flame. Nothing have I done in this life by myself.
I feel as though that we're going to find our rightful place, those of us of color, because the world's going to have to use all of its people to reach that. And they can't continue to put some people aside as a liability.
Even when there weren't benefits in something for myself, if I could see benefits for others, I thought it was a battle worth entering.
To be a torchbearer has been the challenge of my life, because it changed my life forever in the way I live, the way I raised my family, and my personal values. But at the same time, I knew that I couldn't demur by saying, well, I'm not a torchbearer, I'm not this, I'm not that. To the contrary, it was a significant challenge, and I just hope I carried that torch well.
Oh, I think we owe them a tremendous debt of gratitude. In fact, black people around the world owe them a debt of gratitude. And one thing that we as Americans, as black Americans, are really not as aware of as we should be is how what blacks in this country have done is something that has inspired blacks in Cuba, blacks in the Caribbean, blacks in Brazil, blacks in South Africa, blacks in Kenya. has even inspired people like untouchables in India, untouchables in Japan, Aborigines in Australia have drawn inspiration that if you're able and if you're willing to get out there and struggle and put your life on the line, you can make a difference.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. A long way from home. A long way from home.
Major funding for this program is provided by the University of Pittsburgh. Pitt is a leader in education, pioneer in research, and partner in regional development. At the University of Pittsburgh, we are building our future together. Additional funding by the African American Chamber of Commerce.